slowly. Thank you so much for being here. Warm welcome to this session, Governing for the Long-Term Board Accountability and the Foundations for Resilience. We have a wonderful group of guests with us here today. Ludo van der Heyden, long-term collaborator here with Boards Impact Forum. Thank you for being here. Julie Badley, that is the chair from the Chapter Zero Alliance, very important to us. And two very important board directors in our network, Virginie Morgon and also Marina Niforos, that is connected to our chapter in Greece. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Fernanda Tor. I'm the operations director at Boards Impact Forum. And we also have Liselott Engstam, that is the chair at Boards Impact Forum. If you can change the slide, please. So just to give you a quick agenda, we are having this small introduction, and then we'll have a keynote with Ludo. Unfortunately, Ludo cannot join us for the entire session. He has to jump off the call and go and teach. But we have a panel together. So after the panel, we have a poll. We are going to have some questions for reflection, and we go into breakout rooms. After the breakout rooms, we come and we share a little bit our discussions. If we can change the screen.
Yes. Can I just ask everybody to go on mute that is not speaking?
Super. So exactly. Please mute yourselves here on the first on the first part of the session, and we are going to record this first part of the session and make it available. Please use the chat box for any kind of questions you might have, thoughts, reflections. Find your way to the chat box, write to us where you are calling from. That would be great, so we get a bit the networking going. If you have any technical issues, please reach out to us. We also have a very special request, which is please identify yourselves. Sometimes people log in with iPad 2 and iPhone 7, or so please make sure that you change the name. If you don't know how to do that, you can just send me a message and I can do that for you. So if we can change the next slide. I want to give you also a bit of a context of why we are here, and some of you have been joining us on the previous webinar, so you've heard this. I'll try to be brief, but we are really trying to understand how we can translate the principles for nature and climate governance in the boardroom to the context, the specific historical context that we're facing, and looking specifically into European boards. So there's a context where we are looking into opportunities and risks across climate, geopolitics, but also technological transformation, and how do we create that connection. So if we can change to the next slide. And we have three kind of main elements within our project. One are these webinars and the survey that we are actually launching today. Super happy about that. Then we are going to meet in Amsterdam, most likely on the 7th of October. And then we have a roadmap. And this roadmap is a process that we are going to do internally and then share with everyone. So if we can change very quickly to the next slide, this is the most important slide for me personally here today, which is this is the survey that we are launching today. So we will ask, and I'm also going to put the link there in the chat. We will ask every one of you to share your experience sitting in the boardroom, and it's really, really important that you fill in the survey. As you know, we really need the quantity and a special request. Please also share it in your boards, within your networks, with other board directors. That would be very, very useful. I will put the link in the chat very briefly also. Now, without further ado, trying to be really, really efficient, we are looking into oversight and responsibility today. And to bring you some thoughts and insights about this principle for the board, we have Ludo van der Heyden. which is, like I said, a long-term friend and collaborator from Board's Impact Forum. Super. Thank you so much, Liselot. Liselot, do you want to introduce Ludo, or should I? Maybe you want to
You,
do it.
no, it's fine. You can go ahead.
Well, Ludo is, I think, a very special person for us here at the Board's Impact Forum because being such uh, an inspiring person. We've had Ludo as a speaker several times. We had the amazing opportunity to have to co-author a paper with Ludo that we published on board dynamic capabilities. So it has been a really wonderful to be able to be connected. So Ludo is an emeritus professor in technology and operations and management at INSEAD. Um, and he has held the INSEAD chaired person in corporate governance. He's one of the founding academic directors of the INSEAD's corporate governance initiative and co-directs the International Directors Program and the Modern Governance Banking Program. So very much one of the biggest voices in corporate governance in Europe. Earlier he served as co-dean in INSEAD, directed the Advanced Management Program, and held different faculty positions in Yale, in Harvard Kennedy School, etc. So Ludo has been really a prolific writer, has published in many different papers, including the Harvard Business Review, and he has won multiple awards for his contributions in governance, education, family business, etc. So it's a really big pleasure to have Ludo with us. Also, officer of the Order of Leopold the King of Belgium in 1996. I'm mentioning that because we also have other people in the other panelists with great honors from their countries with us here today. That is really worth mentioning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Fernanda. It's a pleasure to be with you. I will start like Oscar Wilde, which is I will deny all the glory that you were speaking about, but it does me a lot of good, and I will skip your my request, which is could you repeat it because I really like it. With this, I will just make a few comments. I apologize, but I couldn't change my teaching. And we're actually doing corporate strategy, the program Corporate Strategy for Board Members, because corporate strategy for boards is a topic. And it's both what is the role, of the board and also what is strategy, and then also what is strategy for the corporation as opposed to business strategy, which is competitive strategy, which is executive. So I will make a few comments. They're very brief. Liselot, if you can move the. So these are the sort of 6 points. I will go very quickly. It's more to review the basics, if you wish, more than surprising you. But these are the 6 points I will go over. So let's start with the first one. And this is, I think, the biggest surprise. Liselot, you can move forward. It's is the view that shareholders are not responsible in a legal way for the corporation. So they're responsible for appointing board members, but they're not responsible for the corporation. And this is for many reasons. One is shareholders are the most disloyal species on earth. So it's very hard, for disloyal people to be really responsible. But also equity markets wouldn't work if you were trading responsibility when you were trading shares. So the whole idea of a shareholding company is that you can split your capital into shares, and of course you can't split responsibility into shares because that would be chaos. And I think that's the first point, which is that I feel that many boards don't really have the right philosophy of what a board is for. And I think that's very important. And I think resilience and growth and things like that all fall into that rubric, which is, what is our wisdom about what is our role, what is our mission, and what can we do? And during COVID, I actually read a little bit of Plato, and it reminded me how insightful this was. And he divides, the city being in this our case the corporation, into three classes: guardians, and these are the board members, guardians of the city. producers, these are actually the executives and the firms, and then auxiliaries and warriors who defend the city. And I think in governance, these would be the auditors, the corporate law, or everything that defends the rights of the corporation to exercise. And I think in terms of philosophy, I really like the statement that I sort of share, which is the mission of the board is to preserve and unchain the corporation from the stakeholders so that it can realize what the corporation could truly be. So that I think is much better than I'm responsible for the corporation. No, I'm responsible for making it as good as it could be. And very often that requires the support of stakeholders, but also requires changing the priority order of stakeholders. And of course, the stakeholder is the key stakeholder is the shareholder. Yeah. So somebody was speaking, so I think it's okay. So the key stakeholder is the shareholder. Shareholder supremacy means you can define the mission of the corporation, which is you can define why you hold shares and what the shares are meant to achieve, but you cannot sort of control it fully. You delegate the control of that mission to the board. So I think that's quite important. And I think that's the first point I want to start with, Liselott. So as I move, I think the point that is related to that is that basically the corporation is a social institution, and Milton Friedman's article of 1970 was repeating this very clearly, and he's basically said, everybody benefits from the corporation, like employees, customers, government. So everybody extracts their surplus from the corporation. So who defends the corporation? Now, the conclusion of Friedman's paper, which is maximize P&L, was because it was 1970, boards didn't exist, and US doesn't have a governance culture anyway. We can see this on TV every day. So the big change, of course, is that instead of P&L, it's the corporation who actually is responsible for implementing the mission, but the owners actually do define the mission. And that's very clear for entrepreneurs, for example, who dislike governance. And I always say, look, in liberal capitalism, you define the governance rules. You have to meet the corporate law, but you define how the company is governed, and you even appoint people who define who actually are going to supervise the corporation. So the board is really the sort of the central command tower of what is actually a social institution. And I think this is important for Chapter 0, which is we don't need to say ESG in order to say the corporation is a social institution. And I think Milton Friedman had too much influence by sort of many people view the corporation as it's just there for the shareholder. This is not at all the case. Corporations live and die with stakeholders. Customers pay for everything, not shareholders. So I think that's sort of the philosophical point, which is quite important. So let me move forward. I don't know why these circles didn't make it in my copy, but somehow they were imported in the thing. Now that is basically means that if you have a private corporation with owner-led, you have a governance trinity. You have the owners who form the mission, and then the board that is responsible for implementation of the mission, and then the executives who are responsible for actually executing the mission. So that's the trinity, or the what I call the trinity of corporate life. And many people think of shareholders as being supreme, but they're not supreme, and they're not even responsible. So let's move forward. So what is the board for, and what is the corporation for? Now, the once you know what the mission is, then what is the next question is, what is the board strategy? And I think let's move forward, because Liselott, these are just the reminders of the question. You actually have three strategies. You have ownership strategy, which is investment strategy. You have a board strategy, the director strategy, and then you have a business strategy, which is the executives. So too many boards think of strategy as the business strategy. And in fact, the key question for the board is, what is our strategy to change the corporation? And maybe the first strategy is to change the CEO. Maybe the first strategy is to change the mission, which I cannot do. I have to influence the owners. But I think the board should first be clear on what is their strategy. And I think too often there's immediate contest of who sets strategy, and this is understood as business strategy. And then the executives, of course, say, well, this is us. And so that's not a good way to start. I think the first question on strategy for a board is, what is our strategy? Which is, what is our lever? How we're going to influence, and maybe it is by a long-term view. Maybe it is by values. Maybe it is by, sort of transformation, whatever. So that's important. And of course, once you are publicly listed, then the owners have no power. And so by definition, the executives take over, because in a publicly listed firm, it's the executives who nominate who actually do all the work. And so then you get into the danger where the power really is with the executives, which is not the way it's supposed to be. So leadership must be taken by the board, but you can only take the leadership if you know what dimensions you want to lead on. So let me move forward. The third point is, strategy is a means to an end. So it's not about strategy, but what is the end? What is the goal? What is the mission? And I think this is where you have another trinity: long-term, medium-term, short-term. So the long-term is more the vision, and that's very often determined by, if you wish, the mission of the company, which is set by the owners. And so the first thing is, what are the goals that we're going to set for the company? And in order to get there, what are the goals we're going to set for ourselves? And how we're going to do this with the executive? So of course, board work is team play. But the most important is, let's align on where we want to go. So this is Alice in Wonderland, who says, which road should I take? And then the Mad Hatter says, it depends where you want to go. And Alice says, I don't know. Well, then don't ask me for advice, because you need to know what the goal is. So strategy is an answer to a question. And the first strategy of a board is, what is the end? Which is, what is the direction in which we're going to move? Next. This is sort of obvious, but it's good to maybe to repeat it, or I hope this is helpful for you. And this is very important in terms of resilience, sustainability, profit maximization. This is all about, which stakeholder has priority. Then it's defining once you have strategy, you have to define what is victory. I've been working in Naftogaz in Ukraine. The key question is, what is victory? When do you actually go for peace? I sort of think you have to be clear on where do you set the bar. So what is the purpose, the goal, but also, when is it enough? And I think thinking about what is victory is important. I will also quickly summarize here Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu, I think, is beautiful in terms of board strategy, because he says, victory belongs to those that pursue a noble goal, which is very different from P&L, because P&L is only what the corporation takes for itself, not what it does for the stakeholders. So most great mission statements are framed in terms of what the company does for stakeholders, not for what it does for itself. And that's where maximizing P&L is sort of a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. So what is the goal? And then Sun Tzu reminds us is, what is the method? And then we need to follow the method with discipline. So this, of course, is what everybody asks about Trump. What's his method? And what is his discipline? And the answer is, if you don't have a method and discipline, it's going to be quite chaotic. Which is, you may not reach what you want to achieve. So what is victory? And I think let me show the next slide, which is this I don't want to spend too much time on, but that is just reminding, this is the special military operation of Napoleon, which killed the French Empire. And here you really see, there's no clear sign of victory. Napoleon wanted to integrate the Russians into the European Union, which was the French European Union. And the campaign was beautifully executed, in the sense that they went all the way to Borodino. and then won the battle there. But this is an example of great execution of a poor plan. So it's not just about execution, it's about what's the quality of the plan, and the plan is an answer to a goal. And the goal here for Napoleon wasn't very clear, or it was a goal that was not achievable. So I think the same thing with Trump today. It's very hard to crack Iran. It may be, but what is the goal of the whole operation? And I think, of course, Trump doesn't. It would be very good if Trump was accountable to a board, but then Congress doesn't work. So that is sort of the CEO model without a board. So it's not just about execution. It's not just about the plan. It's also what is the goal. And I think that's sort of an example of what happens today. Then what is victory? This is very important. As Zelensky say, let's move. Yeah, no, that's the one I want to say, which is where do you set the bar? This is, I think, very often. And I think boards set the bar too high. They want to go for the exploit. And I think here again, you need a trinity. You need to say, what must we deliver in order to have victory? And then let's aim for more, So we aim for more, we have stretch goals, but we don't hold the CEO accountable for the exploit, because exploit, we need luck, we need competitors who are not that strong, etc., etc. So define what is victory is very important. And then I think let's move to the next one. In a turbulent world, it's not the goal in the end, and it's actually the process. So that's my the strategy as a formula is the outcome of a process. And for those of you who know me know that I sort of coined a process dimension in a very explicit way, which basically means strategy starts with engaging stakeholders. And strategy is the outcome of who you talk with. So that's very important. If you talk to McKinsey, if you talk to the owner, you're going to get owner strategy. If you talk to the executives, you're going to get executive strategy. And I think the board should talk more with all the stakeholders. And I think that's where strategy starts. Then once you frame the challenge or the opportunity, then you can start doing strategic planning. That is the second step. But many people think strategic planning is the key in strategy. No, it's first framing the challenge and the opportunity. And then you decide, then you execute, you stop the discussion. And then in a turbulent world, you must evaluate and learn and adapt. So strategy is really a helix. You go through these 5 steps continuously, and it's the quality of the process which will actually give you the agility, which will give you the performance, etc. So that's sort of, I think, a final reminder on the importance of the process. And the Kaizen means continuously improving. So don't skip step 5, which is how's it going? What did we learn? And we need to adapt. And we need to do this quickly. So we're always in this helix, which continues to tick. By the way, execution is only number 4. So most execution problems are because you didn't do 1, 2, and 3 well, or you didn't do 5 well, which is you didn't learn from the past. I think Putin might have learned from Napoleon and Hitler as well, because don't go into Russia or don't go into crazy operations like this. Okay. And then final, I think there is no great process without great leaders. I will leave you with that idea. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm an engineer. I like structure. I like process. You've just seen the process. But I should remind, there is no great process without great people. Because it's people who lead the process. Otherwise, you have AI. Otherwise, you have algorithms. This is the question of AI. Is it machine manages people, or is it people managing machines or governing machines? And I would say you need to have great leaders. And I think if the leaders have a philosophy that we need to deliver results, process goes by the wayside. So you need to have good, competent directors. I would say you even need angels. What are angels? Is people who see things that most other people don't see. And so it's not just, I hate the thing, we need to have competent directors. I mean, that's a meaningless sentence, because the opposite is we need incompetent directors. Of course, we need competent directors. Competence matters. Of course it matters. But the choice of angels, which is entrepreneurs in strategy, entrepreneurs in vision, entrepreneurs in challenges, people who see things. So we need talented directors who are fair, who don't impose their truth. These are the so-called idiots by Plato. People who are very intelligent, but they impose their truth. No, we need board members who serve the corporate mission and actually, with their own talent, try to help the corporate mission. So the danger in boards is that you have people that are crooked or unfair. Shareholder representatives are very dangerous people, but the most dangerous people are the idiots, which is people who sound very intelligent, but actually are imposing their truth, and their truth is the opposite of an angel. So an angel imposes a truth that serves the corporation. An idiot imposes the truth that actually serves him or her. So strategy remains a very human question, and is basically people led. So these are, if you can leave with the last slide, Lislot, this is sort of my points. That these are some of the points. They're sort of obvious, but they may be helpful. I hope it's helpful for you to start with that. And I'm sorry I have to leave, and I've taken the time.
Thank you so much, Ludo. Can I ask just a final question before you go? And that would be around, I mean, you're really pointing out that we're missing to actually own a strategy from the board. So, can you say anything about?
No, we own the board strategy. That's my point about the board strategy. We own a strategy, but we don't necessarily need to own the business strategy. I want the executives to own the business strategy.
Yeah.
But the business strategy is sort of a way of furthering the corporation, more in the medium term. I think the board strategy is implementing what is called the owner strategy, and the owner strategy starts with a long-term vision. So the board strategy is, how do we translate the long-term vision into a set of goals, which we then discuss with the executives, who then frame the business strategy.
Right. And I'm just thinking, how common is it that boards actually do this piece, and do you do it separate from the business strategy? So
that's why I have to go to class, because most executives actually think of business strategy as being the strategy. And I think our point is, no, there's a board strategy. And by the way, that changes completely when you have identifiable owners from when you're publicly listed. Because when you're publicly listed, then the owners talk, by buying and selling shares. When you have identifiable owners like Elon Musk, then they have a clear view of what they want to do. So you need to understand your context. And the idiots, for example, I was on a board of a company, and there was a new board member, great businessman, and he basically said, "This is what you need to do, because that's what I did in my company." And I said, "Look, your company is not. This is a security service. Here we have sort of a financial audit, financial commissaire, an accounting firm. It's not the same. So you need to understand the context. And I think idiots are people who have ideologies about what needs to be done." And then they impose their ideology regardless of whether the ideology is the right one. By the way, ideology is not a strategy. It's a set of rules. So it's like a set of mantras. That's not a strategy, of course.
Thank you so much. We're going to leave you, and we're super
I'm sorry. And you can feel free, Fernanda, to share the slides if somebody finds them useful.
Thank you so
much. And I apologize
so
again. I hope you found it useful. I did wake up at 6 to finish these slides, Lislot, so I did get up early. Okay, now I have half an hour to prepare my slides for 9 o'clock. So.
Thank you so much, Ludo. It was, as always, a joy. And we're going to go in and see how we can anchor this. And we're delighted to have our panel. Julie, Virginie, and Marina that will join us. So warm welcome to the three of you. I'll start with you, Julie, first. Just a bit of a comment to the presentation.
I found that very interesting. I've not actually heard anyone distinguish between a sort of corporate board strategy and a business strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose in the UK context, we would call it strategy versus plan, and the executives own the plan and the board owns the strategy. But I think it was a very interesting way of describing it, and it very much echoes my thought, which is that I've been on boards for 25 years,
Yeah.
and I have never experienced the complexity and a number of competing issues for board attention that we've got today. I mean, it is just astonishing. And that has lots of implications for how you deal with strategy and how you deal with the board. Liselott, do you want me to talk about that a little bit now, or do you want
Yes, please, you can do that. You can comment on that.
Okay,
please.
fine. So, we all read the papers for the board meetings, but to me, that's taken on almost a whole new dimension now in terms of how boards operate, because of this competition of issues and because the lack of time that's available to tackle a lot of them. I just think for a board member, the preparation is really challenging and so important. And I find papers come out later and later, but actually you need to go into that board with the questions really clearly prepared in advance, picking up on Ludo's point about strategy and the longer term thinking and all of that. I also think that there's a need for expert input into your board discussions in a way that possibly we haven't had, because we need to challenge this bit about, we've always done it like that. So we'll do it like, it worked last time, so it's going to work next time, because it won't. Things have changed. And so bringing in experts, whether they're external experts or internal expertise to the boardroom. And I think that slipped, because I was talking to a chief sustainability officer of a very large global company yesterday, pharma company. And, getting the time with the board has become much more challenging than it was 2 or 3 years ago when everybody was talking about sustainability. So I would suggest that we need to do two things very differently. The first thing is we need to consider the context that we're going to be operating in a very much more holistic way. The risks around climate, social issues, biodiversity, water, resource, lack of resources, they're all compounding, they all interact, they all amplify each other. And I think the good boards understand that, but an awful lot still look at these things as single silo issues and don't see the interactions. And the other thing I believe, and this does play to what Ludo was saying, is that if we think how much has changed in the last 6 years since we launched Chapter Zero, you were with us at the time, Liselott. Things have changed beyond recognition in so many ways. AI, geopolitics, the climate and weather issue, immediate apparent weather issues, all of these different things. If we then say that's likely to happen at least as fast, if not faster, in the next 6 years, then for a board strategy, as opposed to what he calls a business strategy, the board really needs to not look at the status quo and extrapolate, which is sort of what we always used to do. It needs to look forward and try to paint a picture of the context that's going to be around in 6 years' time, and then come back to what do we need to do to make sure we're on that path. And I think Ludo's points about, having the end in mind, it's really hard when we don't know quite what the world's going to look like. But what we absolutely know is it's not going to look like it did in the past. The status quo is not going to survive, and the companies that thrive will have found ways of being resilient and adapting and grabbing the opportunities for that future world.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Julie. Let me go to you, Virginie. I think because you also play a double role, you're both investor and you're board member. What is your perspective on actually guiding for both the long term and the short term?
Morning, everyone. Hi, Liselott. Very nice to be here. I wasn't expecting to start this conference or this chapter 0 with the Napoleon Wars, but why not? And not having to go back to Plato or to Milton Friedman, I actually found interesting that reference to Milton and the social institution. Because my big conviction is how to, bring in play at the core of how you help a corporation to achieve its success, stakeholders at large. So if the social institution is all about the economic surplus of a vast, group of stakeholders, then of course that also confirms that moving ecosystemically corporation within a much larger environment and moving its suppliers and stakeholders together is certainly the right direction to go. To your question, Liselott, I really echo Julie's comments, and I think two comments here. The first one is that the corporation, so if we are guardians as board members, we first need to make sure that we have the right executive in place, the right type of CEOs, in a sense, with a level of awareness of the changes that Julie was, describing, and a culture of embedding into the management of a company sustainability and AI, which are, the two major drivers of change, rather than having, brought to the table of the board, which means, brought to the table of in the executive board as well, sustainability just on the side or AI on the side. And I think, you probably all remember the time where we would just have a track on ESG, and then we may have called it impact, and now maybe we are calling it sustainability. But the head of sustainability today should not find hard to come to a board and expose the situation and the risk of its corporation, because the head of sustainability should be fully hand in hand with head of operation, head of R&D, head of procurement. Because for me, the big sort of newness of that approach is that if you don't think of sustainability just from an either ethical angle or proper value of a corporation, but you embed the approach of what does that mean to be a sustainable business, it actually means to have first a continuity of activity. Remember the term resilience that we all discovered during COVID in 2020, what with the exception of the scientists who knew what resilience was about. But continuity of activity is what guardians of a board should mind. We have to make sure that a corporation stands on its feet, and continuity of activity is about, what are my risks? What is my exposure to climate change? What is the access to my principal resources? I have been too far in terms of single sourcing by opposition to multiple sourcing just to reach ultimate competitiveness of my P&L, but which in the current market, which I actually believe is the new normal, just like Julie said, like every other year or every other 6 months, we're going to live into a new crisis. It might be a war, it might be a logistic crisis, hopefully not a pandemic. It might be tariff. It might be, China and Taiwan, question mark on what happened. So my point is continuity of activity, analysis of de-risking with always that angle of what is a sustainable corporation, what are the risks embedded in my business, and how do I mitigate and adapt, which, as specialists of chapter 0, mitigation and adaptation goes hand in hand together in sustainability. And there's been a lot of debate, which I don't think is very fruitful of, shall we do adaptation or shall we try to do mitigation, attenuation faster? I think we should do both. And I think adapting and mitigating your risk, which are very much terms that we use in the impact or sustainability arena, are in fact completely embedded in the way a C-suite, a CEO should run its corporation. That's what shareholder expects to de-risk their corporation in order to be more competitive. And it's about climate change, it's about logistic, it's about that vulnerability to wars and war zones or access to, a region of the world. And I think, we would be gaining a lot by changing the culture, rising the awareness level. AI will help us on that because we have all the data, we have all the new tools. And you might be surprised, that would be my last comment. I was still chair of the audit committee at L'Oréal when we issued the first CSRD report, which was last year. And I thought, and I think I echo what the board thought, that publishing our CSRD report brought to the attention and also a level of knowledge, including to the executive of the firm, a very strong deep dive and better understanding of their risk, hence a better path, a course of action to change, and especially on E1 to E5, so the climate and environmental KPI from climate change to pollution, etc. So I'm a big defender of CSRD, especially on the environmental side, because they are deeply embedded in your risk assessment. And I think the board, as guardian, should pay more attention to the results of that very detailed and very professional measuring and analysis, which is way deeper than just a reporting exercise.
Yeah, thank you so much, Virginie. Let me go over to you, Marina, and actually bring in also the topic that's been mentioned several times, and that is, of course, AI. And you've done a specific research on how AI-driven energy demand is reshaping infrastructure investments. So, and I want to bring it back also to the European boards. What should they be asking right now about the long-term resilience and the balance with the short term in your mind?
So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Liselott, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. So I will link the AI question which you put on the table to a comment also Julie made at the beginning, which is, there's been a tremendous shift in the priorities that both management and by extension boards are facing today. And when we look at some of the surveys that have been done, either at the WEF or the core conference board, 26, we to see AI being sort of at the top of the list of concerns, followed by geopolitical risk and political tensions. And climate seems to have been relegated fourth or fifth or further down the line. And I would say that, this kind of masks a tendency, I think, mostly from the executive side to try to catch up, to manage the uncertainty that we mentioned before, and also not being left behind in terms of all these, FOMO and a lot of discussions of competitiveness around AI, who should be the first, who will win the market share. And when it comes to the board, the AI seems to be overwhelmingly about an issue of productivity, of competitiveness, and perhaps some model risk questions come also. But it's very rarely seen as an energy and infrastructure question. I think that is changing. I think now that we've seen that, to be able to have a competitive advantage both at a company but also at a nation level. This is a lot of the discussion that happens in the US right now. You need access to compute, and compute means physical infrastructure, data centers, and a lot of energy demand that comes with it. So to give just data points, that the global data center electricity demand grew by 17% in 25, and it's expected to surge around 50% of the overall demand in 26, ranking almost like the demand would be ranking as the world's fifth largest electricity consumer. So just the data centers will be the fifth largest national consumer. So the problem then, going back to the decisions of the boards, is that AI capital allocation maybe be evaluated and waved through at a board level on the basis of strategy, business strategy that Ludo mentioned before, and competitiveness rationale, while the energy emissions and the reputational consequences, because there are a lot of political contestation around data centers today. Actually, they're more salient in the US, perhaps because the capital deployment around data centers is so big there right now. It's like the hyperscalers are putting 600 billion this year alone on data center deployment. So, there are a lot of issues behind who's going to pay, and predictably, there's a lot of social acceptance and conflict around those in many jurisdictions. So I would say it's clear, at least from my research, that AI is now becoming an energy question in as much as become a software question. And I think that the second question, which is becoming now to the strategy of boards, is like, who is going to pay for it? Because obviously, the costs of I'm not going to go into the intricacies of the energy model and how utilities recover the capex that is done at the beginning of a project. But obviously, this is recovered through different rate classes, and it's spread throughout a period of years, but also through classes of ratepayers. That means beyond data centers is consumers and industrial and commercial users. So there was an article actually in the FT just last Friday, I believe, a survey of about 1,200 businesses being very concerned about the impact on their energy costs in the coming years because of the surge on data centers and the associated demand. So coming back to the question of the boards and how to handle this, I think because there's so much uncertainty and all these competing priorities, what should you look first, second? So there's a tendency of the boards to try to impose some structure on this uncertainty and, kind of associate a process. Like Ludo said, I mean, our reflex is, okay, well, how do we deal with that? And I think the reflex might be, okay, let's put sustainability in the committee that it belongs. Let's put AI maybe in the risk committee or a technology committee if it exists. And let's try to see how these things pan out. That can actually become a blind spot because I would put forward the thesis that these things are interconnected. So when you look at a business decision on AI, but you don't look at the repercussions on sustainability, you're probably, not accounting for the full cost of that decision. And so I think there needs to be kind of a single transition, talking about Europe and the trilemma that we talk about, the triple transition, sort of the green, the digital, and the sovereignty, which again, if you analyze them, they're actually interrelated. They're one transition lens with three prongs that's very dynamic. So I think, I mean, in order for a board to look at that and have some responses for the long term and kind of resist the pressure for the short term, which is going to be coming a lot from executives who are trying to manage the announcement from the competitor, the pressure for this and the other, the supply chain concerns, etc., is to try to maintain that goal of the dynamic nature of the three transitions and how they interrelate. The second is keep a dynamic risk map. So aside of the strategy, actually develop a risk map that has the three at the same time. So if you expose yourself on one, what is the impact on the other? That will help, I think, also a board challenge their assumptions. How confident are we that we are doing the right thing 3 to 5 years down the road? Can we, as a board, in one page, actually explain how a decision in one of the transition is impacting the other two? If we cannot, then we're probably just thinking in silos and are not doing the right thing. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, and maybe we
Yeah,
can
thank
come
you.
and revisit.
Thank you so much, Marina. And just complementing that, I can say that in my boards, we often also do an opportunity map with the three.
Of course.
Because if you
As
only
well.
do the risk map and not the opportunity map, you're also in a blind spot to see where you can go. So now I'm going to ask you to be a bit shorter in your answers, and looking at these three transitions, green, digital, and serenity. What is the single most important governance shift you believe boards needs to do and that you're trying to push through in your own boards? Julie, do you want to start? Oh, we can't hear you, Julie.
Sorry, I should have learnt that after 6 years of being on mute. So I think a lot of the points that have been made are really good around dynamic risk maps and opportunity maps, and thinking of these things as a system, and thinking of the context, which is one of the things I was saying at the beginning. So I think one of the biggest challenges for boards at the moment in terms of how they govern, I think, is to get all those committees to be looking across the piece. I think the audit committee, and I know no audit committee that's doing this, I should say, the audit committee should be looking at all the parts of their business and the value that's being held on the balance sheet and say, actually, does that business still hold that value in a world which is changing so fast? I mean, in the UK, we used to have something called a long-term viability statement. I think they've even watered that down now. And anyway, people took it as 3 years. So I think that the audit committee has a role to play. The nominations committee needs to put the right people on the board who are going to bring these insights and challenge in a really constructive way. And the sustainability committee, if there is one, or whatever that thing is, should be covering all these aspects. They should be covering resources, water, AI. They should be looking broadly, because just to finish my last point, to tackle the time pressures and a noise in the boardroom, you need those committees to be really rolling their sleeves up. And I think my experience is that having an ESG committee which spent hours looking at this rather than 10 minutes at the end of a board agenda made a huge difference when that topic came back to the board.
Right, which actually also was very much the point of Virginie. So Virginie, what is the single most important governance shift that you see that boards needs to do and that you're trying to push through in your own boards?
I think we should be pushing as board members to bring to every committees. I'm starting from a base which could be challenged, that we don't need another committee on top, but we could. We could have, I don't know, an innovation and disruption committee, which would cover AI and tech and sustainability and R&D, which we don't always cover, and R&D should be taken extremely seriously in terms of where the innovation come from. If you have a much larger acception of R&D, including AI and some of the new technologies to be used. But let's put that aside for a second, not to add too much complexity in the governance of a board, but assuming that we stay with, on average, 3 or 4 committee of the board as it stands worldwide, I would push personally to go deeper in the processes and not in the results.
Okay.
I think committees review results. Financial results, KPI of sustainability, output, outcome, hire, HR, policies and resources. So you have an overview at one point in time, like a picture. And, that's good or that's less good, and then you try to deep dive. But if you go into more of the processes, how did they reach that type of achievements? How did a product got that type of market share using some of the new technologies, maybe AI? How is the continuity of the business ensured during COVID, during the Middle East war, facing the logistic or the tariff crisis? It's all about resilience and continuity of activity. So tell us that
Right.
during committees so that we can bring as guardians our expertise, experience, track record in helping to be even better at having the best in class processes, embedding AI, innovation, sustainability at the core, rather than just reviewing, quote unquote, output
Yeah,
results.
the end result. Yeah. Thank you so much, Virginie. Marina, what do you think is the
So
single most
I will
important stage?
I think the point has been made by both Julie and Virginie, which is I don't think we need more layers to add on top of the existing board. Like too many committees can actually signal that we're not doing our job well. It's just,
Right.
if you don't know what to do, form a committee that can also weigh in on how the board is structured. But I would say that we need to cut the silos between committees. So, for example, in the boards I'm in, I always encourage, for example, an audit committee chair to be part of the sustainability committee when I'm in the sustainability committee. You can actually also have in the mandates, kind of 2 or 3 points where there are intersecting mandates. So, for example, if you're looking a technology committee that's looking at AI capital decisions, you can actually have a point with the sustainability committee to assess the energy cost and the emissions implications and involve also audit on it. So, I think when you start having more of process of interaction and collaboration between standing committees that look at different parts of the strategy, then the sustainability considerations actually become more about strategy than something that my experience has been, at least for some of the companies, not the ones necessarily I serve on, but as you know, through our chapter, we see a lot of them, which is the sustainability committee was very focused on compliance in the past. I think the crisis is bringing forth also an opportunity to really see this as strategy and really drive the value of the climate governance, not anymore as something we need to report on, but something that delivers value in terms of lower costs, in terms of less of a footprint and mitigation of climate risk. So I think it's starting now because of this opportunity to resonate a lot as being also, as a core strategic aspect. And because of what I explained before, I think if we look at it in tandem with, the AI drive that everybody's going through, then we're actually be able to see a more, an overall system view of it rather than just looking at different parts that are moving.
Thank you so much for that. Now we are going to ask our audience to contribute. And we're asking it in 3 questions. So the first one is about the accountability structures. So have we really defined and made sure that it gets into the agenda? Do we really understand the subject? And have we aligned the incentives to make sure that we take into account the 3 dimensions of the transition that we're trying to accomplish and the strategy that needs to underpin that? So we're asking everybody to answer that as much as we can, and I'm waiting for a couple of more answers before we're going to share the results. Okay, so Okay, I'm ending the poll now in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I'm sharing the results. And the results is that we do think that at least almost half of us think we do have the structure, the command of the subjects of these three quite complex subjects is a bit less, and the incentives alignment is somewhat divided into 2 groups. Now we are going to go back to the presentation, and what we want you to discuss in the breakout rooms is, as Europe is trying to navigate these 3, what is one concrete change you could make to ensure that it's embedded and how your board works on that. So we are opening the rooms very soon, and I'm trying to see that we are at least. Okay. So the people who don't want to join, I'm trying to fill up the rooms now so we don't have. Maybe you can just comment on the results meanwhile. Julie, do you want to comment on the results of the survey?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I suspect, well, we're a self-selected group here, aren't we? Because the people who come on this call have all taken an interest in this topic, and I'm quite sure are all leading these conversations in their boardrooms. Having seen a similar survey a few months ago with a very different audience, the scores were much less positive, put it like that. But I think it's good that we're showing progress, and it demonstrates the, I think, the influence that people who really are taking these topics seriously and getting the understanding, the influence that they can have.
Right. Okay, let's open the rooms, and do make a short introduction, have somebody lead it, somebody that can report back, and what is one thing that you can do? So I'm opening the rooms, and we will call you back in about 12 minutes.
Again, last 2 very important comments. This is the last webinar from this series. Of course, we're going to continue with our webinars and our work, but really the next 2 steps in this journey together for this project are right now, the survey. Please, 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 please answer this survey. Do it right now. Do it in the end of the call. It's up, put it up. It's 5 minutes. So just as a transition moment after this call, and also now that it's kind of top of mind, please share it with your board fellow members, with your networks. We're also going to share it, in social media, LinkedIn, emails, etc. So please share, help us to really get a lot of people to answer this survey, which would be really, really useful. And come and join us in Amsterdam. We have a really good agenda that we have been preparing. We're going to have some really amazing speakers, and we're going to have some really exciting working sessions where we really deep dive exactly on the topics from today. So, like I said, pencil down the 7th of October. We will come back with a specific registration page so we can start to collect the interest very, very soon before the summer. Amsterdam is a lovely city in October, and just meeting fellow like-minded board directors. I think it's going to be a really, really amazing event. Thank you so much for being here today with us. A special thank you, of course, to Ludo for presenting, but very, very special thank you to our panelists. Julie Badley, the chair for the Chapter Zero Alliance, always an honor to have you with us. Virginie, thank you so much for being with us. We shared the report from your business in the chat, and I just wanted to point it out to it again. It's an amazing report. And thank you so much, Marina, for being with us, our colleague from the chapter in Greece, the Climate Governance Initiative in Greece. It's a great honor to have you all with us today. Thank you, everyone.
Can
And
I,
see you
Fernanda,
in
before you
Amsterdam.
close off, can I just say that everybody that answers the survey will get a link to a fantastic new book that Fernanda and I also contributed a chapter to, which is on a leadership that lasts.
Love it.
So
Very
do
smart.
answer that, and we'll send you that link. And it's a really, really good book with a lot of prominent authors.
Super smart, Liselot. Very good.